retrain your brain to make peace with those assumptions. So like if you know that at mile 10, your body starts to freak out, okay, like give yourself a statement about that. Like if my body starts to seize up at mile 10, it will be okay. I'm going to keep going. And you start to tell yourself that. Or you can kind of flip it into more of like an if then statement. Like if my calves start to cramp, then I will do.
Welcome back, everyone, to the People Run podcast. I'm your host, Fit here. And this is, as you guys know, for those listening, or if anyone's new, where we dive into the stories behind everyday runners, those trying to get it every day, whether it's work, family. But today's story, or episode, I should say, is a little different. I want to touch on the mental game of when it comes to running. And that's why I've asked today's guest to come on today. I have Maggie here with me, who's a sports psychologist, to talk about that mindset and what it takes to get to elite performance or improve just your steady performance. I'm excited to talk all sports psychology, learn. I hope you learn as well. That's what this episode is for. Maggie, hello, welcome. Thanks for participating and being on this podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. I was very excited to have you on, one, between the sports psychology, but also you into the fitness game. I should have said that a little bit as well. So Maggie knows what's up too. When it comes to fitness, she's also a personal trainer. So I was like, oh, double whammy, double win. So getting right into it, how did you start and get into sports psychology? I believe you have a master's, right, in sports psychology. How does that even come about?
It's a good question. So backtracking like a lot, I was a professional dancer, mostly like on the concert dance side. So ballet and modern dance. That's what my bachelor's is in. So danced professionally in my early 20s, and kind of, if you are familiar with the arts, realize like you need other jobs to kind of sustain your like living. So I got into personal training, was kind of doing both for a while, and then segue completely into just being in fitness. And I kind of got to a point about 4 years into being a trainer where I was just kind of like, well, what do I want to do with this next? Like I was making good money and I had a pretty good clientele, and I obviously loved what I did, but I was like, is this like the only thing I want to do for the rest of my life? And I read a couple different books. One was, I'm trying to remember, one was called The Mindful Athlete, which that's by George Mumford. And he was like a mindset coach that worked with the Bulls and I think some other like elite basketball players. There's also a book, Relentless by Tim Grover. These were just like books that like, just in my like professional world, just kind of I'd heard about, and I was like, oh, like I'm kind of interested. Let me read them. And there was a lot of stuff in there about sports psychology and the mental side of being an elite athlete. And I just was like completely captivated by it. It just really interested me. And I kind of got researching and realized that that was kind of an up and coming degree that people could get. And it was like a growing field. And I was like, you know what, this might be like a nice thing to like enhance who I am as a trainer, like open up more opportunities for me. So I ended up getting my master's back in 2021. I went to the University of Western States out in Portland, Oregon, which they had like a completely online program. So I was able to do it without leaving Chicago, which was really nice. But yeah, that's I kind of just like fell into place just through the other jobs I had.
I love that, more so as a Bulls fan here, and Tim Grover plug of Relentless, which is a phenomenal book.
Yes.
I don't like his second one as much as I read the first one, but the first one talking about the mindset and hearing about Kobe, Jordan, D Wade, his shade on LeBron a little bit.
He does shade on LeBron a little bit. And you know what? I have the second book, but I haven't read it yet. It's like on my like to be read list, and I haven't. It's like on my bookshelf. Okay. I need to read it.
I love that you started into this with Relentless and talking about sports. My ears are already like, okay, let's go.
Yeah. And if you like haven't, if you're listening, you haven't read that book, it's honestly like, even if you're not into basketball, I'm not a big basketball person. Like it's just like a really fascinating book about the mind of like an elite performer. It's kind of, I think Tim was also in The Last Dance, which you like people I feel like from all over just like fell in love with that documentary. So it's kind of like a book version of that in a way. It's just like a really, really interesting read.
Yeah, I would second that, especially with The Last Dance. I think almost everyone I knew watched it, even people that
Yeah,
weren't in sports. It's just seeing what it took to be at the elite and like the sacrifice and the pain and all that. That's probably a top something show, top 100s of the last
for
couple of
sure.
2020s or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Well, you train as well and you personal train, right? And now you're a
Mhm.
sports psychologist. What correlations do you see from you training and now actually being a sports psychologist that helps you?
That's a really good question. I feel like obviously like a lot of my training clients are actually some of them are like not professional athletes, but they're very athletic and like are training for a marathon or whatnot. Even just for like my everyday clients, like people that are just like, I want to get toned, I want to get fit, I want to build strength. A lot of like the pillars of sports psychology kind of revolve around like motivation and goal setting and like just confidence building. And I feel like a lot of times when people decide they want to get on a fitness track, they have a fitness goal, it's kind of like they don't really know where to start.
Mhm.
Or maybe the motivation is there for the wrong reasons, or you know they're nervous to be in a gym setting, or they know they want to get fit but they don't really know like what goals to set, that kind of thing. I feel like that kind of stuff has translated really, really well. Before I start training with a client, I usually sit them down and I'm like, why do you want to work with a trainer? Like
Yeah.
what is your why? You know, do you have like back problems that you want to try to, you know, achieve, you know, you want to feel better in your body, or like maybe you're pregnant and you want to have a really healthy pregnancy. I try to like steer away from some of those like external motivators, like, well, I just want to lose 10 pounds, or like I just want to fit into like a certain pant size, you know? So I feel like some of the stuff that I learned in school, the like confidence building, the ways to properly set goals, that is the kind of thing I really see as like an overlap between like working with athletes and then like working with people in a personal training setting.
For those athletes that uh, it's a kind of convoluted question. So we have social media, we have our mindset here in Western culture, call it if you will, the go 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 hustle nonstop every day. I'll put that as context out there. But what do you say to those athletes? For example, us runners, often I find it's like, okay, I want to hit this PR, I want to hit this marathon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, unless someone's wise enough or has gone through those like tribulations, it's I want to do it in 3 4 months. And I'm not giving myself enough time. I'm gonna just run through a wall, and it's that go go go. I'll do whatever it takes. How do you get them to, like you mentioned in the previous, acknowledge those small wins and acknowledge, hey, this is gonna take time, and if you want to do it the right way and not get injured and not run through a wall, external stress factors. How do you get them to slow down?
That's really hard. And honestly, like I've recently started working with a lot of runners, and it's been very eye-opening to like how crazy they train. Like I just like
I
can't
love it.
believe like when I talk to them each week and they're like, I ran like 20 miles total this week, broken down like that. And I'm just like, oh my God. Like the trainer part of me is always like, how are you taking care of your body? First of all, there is this level of like, yeah, I want to like run at my max, or I want a PR at X, you know, time. And if I don't, then I'm going to be like super upset. And so for me, I mean, usually when I talk to my runners in a session, the first thing, if they've had a race, the first thing I ask is let's talk about everything good that happened. So I want them to acknowledge those wins first. And it's obviously okay to have those days where you're like, I didn't run to the best of my ability, or like, I really wish I could have done this, or whatever. But I'm like, first of all, we got to acknowledge the good things, because there's at least like one good thing that happened. A lot of the runners I've been working with are prepping for the Chicago. I'm out in Chicago, and they're prepping for the Chicago Marathon, which is
Yeah.
in October. Yeah. And it's a pretty big one. And luckily, a lot of the ones I've been working with since the beginning of the year. So we've had like
Awesome.
a lot of time to really prep and get into the like mental work that comes with it. And they've been running a lot of smaller races along the way that are almost like dress rehearsals. The dancer in me is going to call it a dress rehearsal, but
Yep.
they're a dress
No, it
rehearsal for
applies.
the, yeah,
Yep.
for the big one. If a runner were to come to me in like a month in like August and the marathon's in October, I'd be like, okay, yeah, we have some work to do. Like we should be meeting weekly. I kind of give some homework, but because it takes time to build the self-talk and the imagery skills that are needed and learning where your focus needs to be for different things. And even right now, as I'm working with runners, it's eye-opening for them. It's also eye-opening for me. Like when they have a shorter 5K versus a marathon, like what mental prep work comes with that and how it's different, because a marathon training is going to be different than your 5K or your 1 mile race or even a half. So we kind of like go through all those different things. But to kind of go back a little bit, like the whole PR, I didn't PR, I'm upset about it. I want to celebrate small wins first. And then we can go back and be like, okay, like where is there room for improvement? What things do you want to change for next time? And then because they're practicing so often also with their coach, what things can you now add into your practice with your coach to like start to implement some of those changes?
Yeah, I feel that's important. And for those listening, it's, real simple, acknowledging those wins. And yeah, Chicago's coming. A lot of people I've had here or I know of friends, everyone's training for Chicago. It is a major.
Yeah.
I did it last year. It was kind of
Okay.
brutal for me, but
It was.
yeah, I didn't have the best race, but like you mentioned, it was one of those things where I'm at with my running now. I was able to like, hey, this didn't work out, but this did, this
Right.
that. And it's something I'm implementing now. Mine's a little bit later this year. I'm doing it one in November. But,
Okay.
for those listening, first nugget or several, I think at this point, but is acknowledge those wins. Maybe you picked up better cadence. Maybe you were a little faster the majority of the race. Maybe you feel you hydrated better. That said, Maggie, I want to ask you, now that you're working with a lot of, because this is going to be exciting, one to me and also for those listening, you're working with a lot of people running for Chicago. For now, I'm going to say one of my favorite majors just because it's very flat. Chicago is awesome. We kind of talked about
It
Chicago
is
before
flat.
this. Yeah. So my first one was New York and hilly, and now we have Sydney, which is pretty much a
Okay.
mountain.
Okay.
Insane. But what are some common trends you're seeing amongst these runners? I suspect a few, but I'm curious from your angle as a sports psychologist that you're seeing amongst these runners, because I'm sure you're dealing with some. You've already hinted for those listening. What are you seeing amongst these people training? And I'm sure you're seeing different levels. Someone training more, someone training less.
Yeah. Correct. Some people are training way more. Some people are running a lot more of those smaller, like 1 mile, 5K races. They're kind of doing even like one a week. And the interesting thing there is like, okay, like which races can you kind of treat as like fun runs? And I think, because I'm like, you can't keep every race at this level where the marathon is. Like you will burn yourself out. So it's easier said than done. Like most of my runners are like, yeah, that's fine. I can run that 1 mile and have fun with it. And then like they don't do the time they want and then they're upset. So like kind of how do we not view this as a setback? Some of my other runners it's actually interesting. A lot of them are actually, they don't like the shorter races, like the 5Ks and the 1 miles. Like I find it so interesting because I am more of a recreational, like I run, but I run for fun. Like you will probably never see me running a full marathon. And for me, I'm like, 1 mile seems way easier. You run 1 mile, you put all your energy in and you're done. It's like 7 minutes of your life, 8 minutes, 6 minutes. And a lot of my runners are just like, no, like I'd rather run, 10K half full marathon. That was something that was like very interesting for me. And it's a pretty consistent trend, at least with most of my runners, not all of them, but that idea of like they want to do more halves, they want to do more long runs. And a lot of them, I mean, they do like their training multiple times a week. They do their speed work. They're kind of playing around with like, okay, like where do we taper off? Where do we do shorter runs and kind of mimic that like mile time that they want to keep consistent? I would say like another thing that a lot of runners I'm working with are working on is how do I not start out of the gate too fast and then like burn out like closer to the end of the race. Even with like shorter races that can happen. And how do I keep consistent? Or if I do start not at the pace I want to start at, like how do I not get super negative toward the end of the race or like panic or, that is definitely, something that I feel like across the board I'm working on with runners is consistency, but also like, how do we deal with that setback in the middle of the race if it happens, which is like the mental game, right?
Yeah, that's it's funny. I'm hearing a lot of the common trends you see amongst runners, and I'm sure for those listening, you're hearing some commonality. So it's interesting to see like you as a sports psychologist are seeing it too, and at different levels of running. Um, I'm curious at what do you tell them for like self talk and to help make that shift. For example, you mentioned one which is super common, and no matter if you're the fastest in the world or like you're just a recreational runner, where
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, I know I'm supposed to start slow because the data and everything out there says you should start a little slower and then ease into your pace, but the
Hmm.
gun goes off, there's thousands of people near you, your adrenaline's pumping, you're excited, and
Hmm.
boom, out the window goes the plan that your coach created for you. And then
Uh-huh.
some can like shift because they have it in the mindset, okay, look, I started out too hot, let me slow down, and some just blow up. What's some of the self-talk you work them through to like think about, or cues or anchors and that kind of stuff?
That's a really good question. So a lot of what I do with like athletes and artists across the board is self-talk, because self-talk takes a lot of time. And usually like the self-talk we have for ourselves, it's all habitual. So it takes a lot of time to fix a habit, basically. And not to say everyone's self-talk is like negative, but like a lot of people don't have the most helpful self-talk. So how do we like make it helpful? But basically, like we're starting weeks before, and there's kind of a couple things that I do when it comes to self talk. One is for running or for any sport, really, day of, like what instructional things you need to be telling yourself as you're going out there. Like, I'm going to run at X pace. I'm going to do this with my breathing. I'm going to do this with my gait. You're kind of like listing, even though it might seem kind of elementary, like it's stuff that you feel like you know how to do. You need to start repeating those instructional things to yourself. First of all, like to get it in your head beforehand. And then when you're in the race, if something doesn't go according to plan, that's what you're going to be telling yourself, is that like those instructions to help you kind of even said it, like get you back to where you're supposed to be. So that's the first part. The second thing that I always tell people is for a race, and it's probably different for different races depending on the weather, depending on the amount of people running the race. Obviously, the marathon's going to have a ton of people. There was just a race here in Chicago that was on July 4th, which is always notoriously like super, super hot. So, like, if you don't run well in the heat, like those kinds of things, start to normalize any assumptions you're making about the race and retrain your brain to make peace with those assumptions. So like if you know that at mile 10 your body starts to freak out, okay, like give yourself a statement about that. Like if my body starts to seize up at mile 10, it will be okay, I'm going to keep going. And you start to tell yourself that. Or you can kind of flip it into more of like an if then statement. Like if my calves start to cramp, then I will do this. Like, so you're kind of already settling some of those presumptions, because
Yeah.
they are just assumptions. Like you don't know if they're going to happen. But I want people to be at peace with what they're doing when they enter the track or whatever.
Yeah, I love that, especially that last part. I feel like this is probably a horrible explanation. You probably have a better one, but like it's kind of like that you tend to do something at XYZ mile, like you mentioned, and that your mind elevates to here. This is the bad
Hmm.
explanation part. But because you're already acknowledging it before, it comes down to here.
Exactly.
Excuse my gibberish for those watching.
No, that makes sense. That's like exactly what it is. Like you're
Okay.
making yourself at peace with anything you're worried about before it even starts. Because they're all assumptions. Like you don't know if you're going to overheat. You don't know if you're going to, feel leg pain, but you might. So let's retrain your brain a little bit. I always tell people I'm working with, it's not necessarily like, I feel like in a lot of times in like media and stuff, it's like positive self-talk. Everything needs to be positive. Yeah, to a point, but like it's not all going to be sunshine and rainbows. So I'm not going to tell you to think that way. Like I want you to prepare, which is I think like one of the biggest things about mental skills training and sports psychology is we're preparing you so you can be your best. It's not like everything's not going to be positive all the time. So yeah, that's perfect way of
That's
saying it.
awesome. That reminds me of Connor Mantz. He's our top American marathoner right now, and he's running
Mm-hmm.
Chicago. He
Mm,
likely will beat, I'm hoping so, the American record for US, which hasn't
okay.
been broken in a long time. That said, I remember, trying to remember what race it was. I think it was New York or one of his earlier races last year. He had talked about, and I think he was working with a sports psychologist as well, and something about how he dedicated the last few miles to each person, like his wife and other people, and that
Oh,
was his
nice.
mental like mile 19 this person, my sports coach, mile 20 my fitness coach, mile 30 my wife, well, not 30, but you get the point,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
26.2. So it's interesting to hear that as acknowledging your weaknesses, it kind of sounds like, but getting ahead of the curve with it.
Yeah.
And now my brain is going on, I don't know, and I'll pivot this to ask you, like, what role does philosophy play in all this? Because as we're saying this out loud, I'm thinking of Greek philosophy, obstacle is the way, stoicism, and that kind of stuff, which is a favorite topic of mine. I won't delve into that too much, but what role does philosophy play into all this?
It could be very like motivational, and that's the other like piece of all of this is like sometimes you just need a like mantra or a motivator or like some sort of statement that's going to kind of just like that guy, like just like something that will just kind of help push you toward those last couple miles. And that's where I bring out that I'm like, maybe you just need a phrase that's something that resonates with you or something that's really important to you, or maybe it's like as simple as you've got this, or whatever. But sometimes you need that instead of like some elaborate self-talk thing. So like you start to like know what you need, and that's also why I like to start working with runners in advance, so that it's not just about the marathon. Like we start to know like, okay, remember that half marathon you did in June? These were the things that happened. So you know that you do better with this kind of self-talk, or you do better with this using this kind of imagery, or whatever in your toolbox. Like my job is to present you with as many tools as possible so you can also figure out like the best things that work for you on your race day, because maybe certain things aren't going to work for you, and that's okay. But sometimes also like for the prep, if you know that you run a little more anxious and you need something that's going to calm you down, maybe there's certain like philosophy ideas or things that kind of like can calm your nervous system, and that's also a super important piece of your like pre-race routine.
Gotcha. I want to run a common one that's common nowadays because of how big running is. What do you
Mm-hmm.
say to someone who goes because they're looking at Strava or social media, or their favorite athlete, or maybe they're just relating to sports? We have
Yeah.
some triathletes on here as well, and it's like,
Okay.
oh, I'm too slow, I'm not going to hit my time. And they just shut down completely because of they're not going to hit their time, and they feel they're too slow, or they're comparing each other to like the next person on Strava or their friend or whatever who is supposed to be at their same level.
Yeah, that's super common in almost every sport or art that I work with, is like comparison and the idea of like, oh, I'm not going to hit that time, or I'm not going to do that. So there's like two different pieces to that. One, that's a cognitive distortion. That's like something you're telling yourself that you don't know for sure if it's true. So the very beginning of me working with athletes on their self-talk, everyone gets like this very cute little worksheet with a list of like all 10 cognitive distortions. There's 10. And if you have a thought like that, like, I'm not going to hit my 6-minute mile time
Yeah.
because, my kid was up all night crying, or like, it could be an excuse, or it could be like, I'm just not good enough to do it, or whatever. I'm going to be like, okay, so that's just something you're saying. Like, that's not a fact necessarily. Obviously, like, you also know your body and you need to be realistic with yourself. So that's why we go back to goal setting, and we're setting realistic goals. So if you know it's realistic for you to have a 6-minute mile, like that's absolutely a real thing. Then if you're telling yourself it's not possible, well, why? We'll go into like confidence, usually it's just a self-talk thing. So we're like, pull out the cognitive distortion. I have the person say it out loud to themselves, like, realize how this sounds, label it, and then we reframe it. So we'll reframe it into a more helpful self-talk statement. And I do that probably like 100 times with my athletes. Like, it's just something that you're constantly retraining your brain. But I mean, the other piece of that is self-awareness, right? Like, if you know there's a certain milestone that it's not possible for you to achieve. I'm working with some athletes that are in their 60s and they're faster than I am. They're like really fast runners. Are they going to be running at the same speed as like a 30-year-old? Probably not. But that's also the self-awareness then of like, what is my standard of excellence and how am I going to get there? And that can't be, Susie's standard of excellence or whoever's standard of excellence. It's kind of like understanding your own abilities. And that is like a very early on thing that I work with athletes on. I want you to hit your goals and do things that you didn't think were possible, but also we have to be like realistic with your goals and like what is possible.
Yeah, I love that again. The identity piece.
Yeah.
Without learning psychology, I found that's one thing that's always helped me. Like, do identify as XYZ person, then usually you got to follow what traits does XYZ person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's say it's a 6-minute mile and you're not there yet. Okay, what does the 6-minute mile person do? How do they show up?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then can you do that?
Right.
Like runners, we all love to, a lot of them. We all love to talk about running. You can be in a work setting, you can be at a wedding, and the first thing they're going to tell you is, yeah, I ran so-and-so marathon last week, 2 weeks ago. That's all our identity, On that note, exactly, how do you help someone whose identity is all running and maybe they're performing at whatever they feel is their, standard of excellence, but they recently got injured or something stops them? Because that's
really
crushing
hard
to a lot of us.
Yeah, no, injuries are detrimental to a running season. It's really hard. It's hard to come back from an injury. I'm working with a couple of runners who didn't get to run the marathon last year, and this is their first marathon back. So like kind of talking through like overcoming that fear of re-injury, which luckily like most people I feel like I'm working with right now in running at least are not dealing with like the fear of re-injury. If you're like working really hard and you have a setback, like injury, sickness, maybe there's another reason that you can't keep up your training the way that you can. First of all, we take a step back and we're like, okay, like understanding like what is controllable and what is not. Right now, there's nothing you can do that's within your control to like get you running again. Almost like a different set of self-talk and a different understanding of confidence and like the idea that you are not your injury and this idea of resiliency. Like, how can you move forward when you are injured? Like, what things do you need to do? A lot of times, if running's the only thing you do, it's your only hobby. If you have that like high level of enmeshment, then it's also like, well, what else can we find in your life that's important to you that's not running, which is a huge thing for all athletes because you're like so consumed in what you do and you don't want to take any time off because you feel like you always have to be practicing, which isn't always healthy. So like there's also that piece of like, what else is going on in your life? Maybe this is for some reason you have to take a break from running. The other interesting part of dealing with an injury is it gives you a good opportunity to use imagery, which is really, really hard for people, but it's also a really great mental tool, whether you're preparing for a race and you are actively running or you are injured, because you can mentally practice without physically practicing. So it's really hard for people to do correctly because you have to use all of your senses. And so sometimes people are like, well, how do I use taste when I'm doing mental imagery? Or how am I using sound or touch? So we do imagery exercises. I'll usually be like, pick a song that is on the like beat of the mile time you want to be running, or, something that's like a motivator for you. That's your sound. Or sometimes it could be like the cheering of the crowd or, some other things. And so we get into that idea of deliberate practice. There's like a theory that it takes 10,000 hours of practicing something to achieve like a mastery level. That can also be done mentally because you're using those same like parts of your brain to achieve that skill. So imagery is a great time, it's a great time to do imagery when you're recovering from an injury, because you're kind of keeping that part of your mind active.
That's interesting. Essentially, especially using the five senses, I got a lot of ideas just hearing that. You hear, funny enough, almost all my marathons, just naturally, I always pick a song that's kind of like my theme. And it just prompts me up, and sometimes I envision like, okay, And I never hear it because, Bluetooth, I don't run with headphones anymore, but like you can't, the Bluetooth doesn't work well at races. But there's always some song
Yeah,
in the back of my head that, like, okay, when mile 20 hits and I'm dying here, this is what's in my head.
right.
Uh,
So true. It can be a great motivator. There's also like a metronome app that I've shared with my runners that like I know it sounds weird, but like if you know there's like a cadence you want to be running
no,
at,
yeah.
that like beat of the metronome, you can like adjust it to where you want it to be. And that could be a great just like sound to have when you're doing your mental imagery.
Yeah, no, not weird at all. I think that's a common practice that, well, not too common, but like for those that do work on their cadence to like try to use
Yeah.
a metronome, some watches have it. I've heard of
Hmm.
things of like, hey, Spotify, you can easily search a playlist depending on BPM. Say it's 170 you want to hit, you could just search it and it'll give you your favorite songs, whether it be Taylor Swift, Metallica, or
Yeah,
Post Malone or someone, whoever. I'm throwing
exactly.
random names there. But um, that's pretty cool. Like to think of the imagery, and it's perfect, like you said, of doing what you when you can't do something, what can you do? That's obviously where my mind goes a lot, but it did
Hmm.
take a lot to get there. I often
Sure.
think when I'm injured or sideline, it's like, okay, can I lift more? Can I hit the
Right.
gym more? I can't use this leg. Can I use the other one? Can I work on upper body? So to kind of hear it in another spin of, okay, you can use imagery in the senses. That's pretty awesome. And something I think you guys should, whoever's listening, maybe let's give it a shot and try it out. Next PR incoming. Uh,
Yeah.
um, I want to touch on kind of similar, but I'm sure you work with this a lot. And I believe I saw it also that you do work with some athletes that have this. What do you say to someone who, this is the typical runner here, and actually I believe it applies to all sports when you try to get elite level, body image, wanting to lose weight
Hmm.
and under eating. Maybe it's a mom post pregnancy. I want to get back to what I did before. How do you work with that? And what do you say to someone like that?
Body image is really hard. And full transparency, like being a former professional dancer, like I definitely struggled with a lot of body image issues and a lot of like it's it's body image is such a mental thing too because it's like how you're perceiving yourself. So the idea of like self acceptance is really really hard. For runners it's interesting because you have to stay fueled, otherwise you're not going to be running at the levels you want to be running at.
Yeah,
So if someone is like feeling self-conscious about the way they look, I kind of again go back to like that self-talk of like, okay, like why do you feel this way? Like what, why is your mind telling you this? And then we try to rephrase it because it is this like mental, of like our society has in our heads like this is how you need to be looking as an athlete or as a dancer, this is this body image for men and women. And it's kind of like how do we like take ourselves out of that, and what does having an in shape body mean to you individually as a person? Like if it's like I need to have a six pack, it's like kind of like going back to that, like what's your why? I'm like, well, why do you need a six pack? Like what is this serving for you that you need to look like this way? Kind of going back to like happy weight, like where you feel your best. If someone, a personal training person comes up to me and they're like, I was 130 pounds at one point. I felt my best. I didn't have back pain. I just felt, really in shape. I felt really confident at that weight. Cool. Like the reasoning behind it is there. I'm all for feeling good in your body. Like, what do you love about your body? Like, what, things do you want to maybe be able to show off, or like what makes you proud as an athlete or as a everyday person? Like let's work on those things. But a lot of times with body image it ends up kind of circling back to those like that inner dialogue because it is so mental and it is like all about your own identity. So I kind of want to know like what is your self identity and how does that tie to how you view your body, and then let's like work on like kind of keeping that united in like a healthy way.
got it. Okay. So like you get them to pretty much acknowledge like, hey, this is, where I want to be. And it sounds like you work to the root cause of it and why
Mhm.
they're feeling that way. Um, what does that process seem like once you start working on those things and they eventually get to at least a happy medium, maybe? What does that look like in turnaround?
So it kind of goes back to also celebrating wins and progress, versus like one little idea that we have in our heads. That's like the biggest thing that I like to tell people and that I like to measure. And that's also why specifically with personal training clients, like unless they tell me no, I'm like, well, let's track what you're lifting. Let's track, how fast you're running. Let's track, not track necessarily, but like, let's check in on how you're sleeping. Let's check in on your stress levels. And then some of my clients too, I prefer sometimes especially with women, like doing just body like measurements over the scale, because sometimes it's maybe I didn't lose the weight I want to, but like my waist went down a couple inches and I'm fitting better in jeans. To me, that's like more important than, oh, the scale moved a few pounds.
Yeah, of
So
course.
like we track that stuff too, unless I have a client that's like, I don't want to do that. And then we don't. But kind of understanding where you're at and like celebrating those wins. And that takes time and like self-acceptance and kind of building confidence and having better self-talk. All those things need to kind of fall into place. It's a really good question.
It's something that comes up in runners, I'm sure, a lot. I know it for certain. Just to give you a more specific scenario, you look at the quote unquote typical runner, top
Mm-hmm.
20, 30 finishers. Some of them are from Africa, some of them are American, some of them are from UK, wherever. And on the women's side, it's probably sub 130 pounds, 120, 110 at times. On the guy side, unless they're tall, which tall is a whole nother aspect because typically they're not always as tall. There are some,
Mm-hmm.
but it's 150, 130, and they're super lean and shredded. And there's this whole thing with running where it's like, I need to lose weight and be very light in order to be fast. But then you
Mm-hmm.
also have now with the advent of hybrid athletes, high rocks and social media, where you got the super muscular lady or woman or guy here
Mm-hmm.
that's like shredded and huge, like 200-pound all muscular and still hitting sub 3 hours. It comes from both angles is what I'm saying. I guess if you could give a 1-2 liner on that, I know there's more that goes into it and this takes time and practice, but what would you say to someone like that?
I would say try not to compare yourself to others, which is easier said than done. But if I could only say one line, I would say you are not that person. And you kind of don't know what's going on in other people's lives. Like we see these people that are super shredded or super lean or super whatever. And like, I'm like, you don't know how healthy they are. You don't know, what else is going on at home. You don't know. I mean, now in Hollywood, we're comparing ourselves to women that are all on like Ozempic. I'm like, you don't know like the ins and outs of everything they're doing. So you can only worry about you. You can't pay attention to what they're doing. You can only worry
Yeah.
about what you're doing, how you're prepping, how you're training. Because at the end of the day, the only thing you can really change as much as you can is you. You can't change what other people are doing or how they're looking. And it's you're right. It just takes a lot of time to like get to that point where you're like, I don't really care, or like I can't pay attention. And the whole running, like Strava is so interesting because I didn't know what it was until I started working with runners. And I'm like, oh, you guys have a whole social media
Yeah.
dedicated to comparing yourself to others, which, it's
Yeah.
like it's good and it's bad.
It's like an Instagram with stats, which is even crazier because
Yeah.
it would be like if Instagram went, hey, here's the person you're following. What's all the things people love on Instagram nowadays? This person is worth so and so. This person has this house. This person has this dream job.
Eating
That's
at
what
this
Strava is for
restaurant.
runners.
Yeah. 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 And it can be motivating for some of them. Like they'll see like, oh, so and so went out and did this like 5-mile run. Like I should get out and run. Like there's certain like good parts to it, but there's also a lot of bad of that like comparison of,
Yeah.
oh, like they did this, they did that. Now I want to do it. They got first place at this race. Like I why didn't I get first? So it's like it spirals into that negative self-talk and self-doubt, where at the end of the day, it's like you're not being self-aware then because you're kind of shifting the blame or the focus onto someone that's not you.
Yeah, I find that this is just my take. So for anyone listening, or Maggie, if you have a difference of opinion here, but I feel like we're in a good place partially with a lot of things, not just running in general, where there's so much information out there that you
Mm-hmm.
can find a solution and do something to anything at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Versus just to take running, for example, 10 years ago, running was, hey, go drink Gatorade and Coca-Cola and go run 26 miles. Now we know you need to fuel. You should be lifting.
Yeah.
We got, hey, you might want to talk to a sports psychologist. You want to be resting. You should manage your stress levels. We know all these things, but at the same time, there's 40 variations of that. So this is the partial
Mm-hmm.
part. whereas there's so much information that it causes people into analysis paralysis, and then they don't move forward because there's so much out
Yeah.
there. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that especially, I think social media is a huge part of it, where like I'll get clients, personal training and runners and, other, where they'll be like, I saw this on TikTok. Like, what do you think of, and it's like, you get told like so many different things that it's overwhelming, and our body or our minds were not meant to take in all this information. You could say that about a lot of things that you see on social media. So it's kind of like knowing not to be like, with a lot of athletes I work with, I'm like, do you have a timer on your Instagram? Like, are you like kind of regulating what you're taking in? And, when I work with athletes, I'm also like, I get to know them enough that I can be like, that's not really like what you should be focusing on, or like, is this something that's really helping you? Because I do agree, we're taking in way too much information, and usually it's not all good information.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure you get athletes, and I know you work with dancers, performing arts, and people who just want to work on performance, whether it be work and whatnot. Like, I'm sure you get people that just come up to you like, hey, I want to do this. And it's like a blog, a post, a TikTok, or an Instagram. Like, what are some of the things or tips you would say for people in this day? I feel it's very needed to refocus, I'll say, because focus can be a cliche.
Everyone needs to have like some sort of structure to their day, which I find sometimes with focus and doom scrolling and like getting on these weird tangents with different things. I'm like, I know it sounds crazy. Like, it's not crazy, but it's just like, you'd be surprised how many people where I'm like, okay, like, do you have a schedule for like how you're running your day? And they're kind of like, well, like I wake up and then I do this. And then like, I mean, obviously we have work, like, most of my athletes have normal 9 to 5s or whatever, but I'm like, sometimes you need things in a calendar. Like, I have a lot of clients that have ADHD. I'm like, you might need 3 calendars. You need like different things that you're checking off. Where we'll do like, do you have your like 3 must do tasks for the morning, and actually check it off, like things to kind of stay on task so that you're not like constantly ping ponging around. And when I work with student athletes, I'm working with a couple right now and they're all on summer break. So I'm like, how are you structuring your day? And of course they're like, I don't want to, I want to play all day until I have to go, do whatever I'm doing with my sports. So that's also a balance of like, you want to take your time to enjoy, but you also need some structure. I think like so many people don't have a solid routine. And that also goes back to like, when we prep for like the marathon, I'm like trying to get all my runners to have a pre-race routine. But that also starts with not just the day before the race or the night before the race. It starts with like the weeks leading up to the race. Like, what is your routine? And what do you need to do for you and your body to be at that point?
Yeah, I love that.
Okay.
I think organization is definitely important. I mean, I think anyone, no matter what level, especially if we're talking marathon or just performance in general, the times you've had success, organization played a key role. And it's just not just the training. It could just be like, okay, on this day I spend this time with family, and on this day I do this. We all, especially runners, we all training. We're all about our training. We have our speed days that we never want to let go, and our long ones we don't want to let go. And for the most part, most people will get in, especially at the marathon versus like other distances. But what role does stress recovery play in sports psychology, or doing things other than running, so that you do have like this is, I'll overshare here a little bit. I've dealt with at times where like my central nervous system is that go, 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 coffee all the time, nonstop, where like eventually my body just shuts down. And I mentally, I'm ready to run through a brick wall and do 26.2 tomorrow, but the body's like, no.
It's super common in athletes because athletes and artists are perfectionists. So they like feel like they constantly have to be working at 100%, which obviously is like not possible, and leads to burnout. And whether you burn out after like a week of running that high or months, it's important to know like when you need to give your body recovery, whether that's mentally, physically, both. First of all, I think that like also comes into like the idea of like injury recovery or like building resiliency. Like, when you put all your eggs in one basket, if everything's in just running, I run, then if something not so great happens, it's like you have nothing else. And it's harder to be resilient if you have like, maybe it's quality time with your family every week, or like, you read or you garden or you have some other hobby, then at least like it's like you have this other part of yourself, which is really important. And it's not to say that your sport can't be a huge chunk of who you are, but it is important to have like time dedicated for other things in your life. And maybe that means like Sunday is dedicated to, I'm going to go to my garden for a couple hours and do XYZ, or like I'm going to spend time with my significant other. We have a standing like date day on Saturday nights or Sundays or whatever. So just kind of like making that should be part of your routine and your structure to have those other things mixed in there. And I also tell people to think about when they're like, well, like I'm not training, like what am I going to do if I'm not training? Think of like how these other things you're doing are helping you. If you're always training and always running and always doing whatever it is your sport is, and that forces you to burn out, you're not helping yourself.
Yeah.
So if you're giving yourself that time off or that time to do something else that you love, you're actually kind of helping your running career, because you're giving yourself that break that you need, because you are going to need the break. And I feel like sometimes it's like everyone knows it, but they don't want to hear it. And then when they hit a breaking point, they're like, shoot, I should have done that. Another thing I'll tell people that feel like they have too much on their plate, or they're trying to juggle like running a lot of days a week, or, balancing running and work, is I'll be like, okay, you know what? On Sunday, I want you to sit down and I want you to write out all the things that you need to do this week. Whether it's like, I need to do my 3 runs, I need to do, this for work, I need to take care of my, parent, whatever it is that like the priorities, write them out on Sunday and rank them. And then like, make sure those are the things that you get done, and all the other stuff, don't worry about it. Like kind of understanding where to like put priorities. Because you can't do everything. You can't do everything in a day. You can't do everything in a week. And, it's also for runners. When they tell me all their running, I'm like, well, when are you going to do your cross training? Like, when are you going to do like your foam rolling, your warm-ups, your lifting? Like maybe instead of running like 5 days a week, you do 4 days a week, but you may give yourself a day to cross train, because that's also going to help you as a runner. Like, I think runners like to forget about the other, I'm like, yeah.
We're all guilty of it. You're on a hot streak, runs are going amazing. You have a whole few months of just awesome runs and a lot of mileage. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, I haven't been doing strength training. And then boom, something comes knocking on that door, and it's like,
an injury. Yeah.
It's a little late now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely one, everyone listening, take heed on that one, scheduling your recovery and your side time, your cross training. We've had a lot of runners on here, but you're also hearing it from a sports psychologist now. So it's got to be real. Maggie, I want to ask you a set of quick rapid questions here.
Okay.
I kind of curated just for you.
Okay.
We've touched on some, so I'll skip some one, but I'll start with the first one. What is one thing, you can do several if you like, that runners should stop telling themselves?
One thing. Let's see. I think one thing that they should stop telling themselves is, I'm going to burn myself out at X mile. I think that's one of the most common things I hear. It's different miles for different people, but just don't think about it. Don't think that you're going to burn yourself out or that you're not going to make it.
Okay. That's an interesting one to hear, that people are looking for a burnout. I try to avoid those.
They're like, it's always mile 9. I just like,
gotcha.
I start, like that kind of thing. I'm like, don't think about mile, like try to think of each, don't think about it. Just don't worry about it. Like, don't worry about the future. Worry about like where you're at now.
No, and like you said, you gave enough tips earlier where it's like, hey, if that's something that always happens, what can you start telling yourself now?
Right.
So you're not thinking about that the day of.
I think if I had to add one more, I know you said one. Don't worry about people. Don't worry about people passing you.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That's another one where I hear like, oh, they passed me, and then I like got flustered, and I'm like, do not worry about people passing you.
Yeah, the old cliche: run your race. A lot harder to do when you're in the race, but run your race. What's one mental skill runners should train, or just endurance athletes in general, cyclists, runners, sports, lifting?
One mental skill, imagery.
Hmm.
Easily. I think there's a lot that comes with being good at imagery. I think it leads to like better self-talk. I think it leads to better mental preparation. I think it leads to being more motivated. And I think a lot of people don't know how to do it properly. Or like they think they're doing it, but they're not really doing it. I just think like if everyone did like proper imagery, they would feel a lot more prepared and consistent in the times that they want. And I feel like it's like the sneaky skill that like a lot of people don't really do.
Okay, I'm gonna steal some follow-ups to that.
Okay. Okay.
Is imagery and part of their like just I'm just gonna say it. Is imagery and visualization the same thing?
No, that's a good question. So, visualization is kind of like if I just was like, visualize yourself running, like, okay, great. Like, it is a form of visualization, but full imagery should be like, it should be a practice, like a mental practice. So, like, if you were, I'm going to do it with like a more technical thing just because it's a little bit easier. Running also is part of this, but like if I were going off of triathlons, let's say you're trying to master a certain stroke, freestyle, breaststroke, whatever. Um, you are like fully absorbed in it because I'm like, okay, what are you wearing? Exactly what are you wearing for this competition? Like, what is your uniform? Okay, you're wearing it. Where are you? What does the water feel like? What sounds are you tasting the chlorine in your mouth? Like, all of those things need to be like so locked into your brain, all of those senses. Visualization is more just like the movie of that happening, but I'm like, are you tasting the water? Are you like hearing the horn or whatever that's going off? Are you like, you could feel the chlorine burn in your eyes? Like it is like a mental absorption. And I think that's where like a lot of people like fall off is like they do visualization and they're just kind of like rolling it through their brain and they're not like so absorbed in the sense part of it. And then usually like how I have athletes practice it is okay, do this loop for like 15 seconds and then give yourself a 15-second break and go back and forth for, whatever time you have, like 5 minutes even is good. I wouldn't tell someone like, I've read books and stuff where they're like, do this like 100 times. Not everyone has the time to do that. But
Yeah,
like, if you can dedicate like 5 minutes even and go 15 seconds on, 15 seconds off, and you're that absorbed, then that's, I would say, good.
I love that. I'm sold on imagery. um, I feel like we often hear this about like elites. People like Michael Phelps comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Eliud Kipchoge, the goat of marathoning, undebatably at this point. It's in Relentless, the Kobe's, Jordans, D Wades of the world, Wayne Gretzky. I think even the earlier stuff. I'm a big sports buff and just kind of into it, but it's not like an open discussion. I think you kind of hinted at this, where it's like, hey, imagery, and people often confuse it with visualization. Where this
Mm-hmm.
is like you said it, like taste the chlorine. Like what? That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah,
um,
no, and I think the other thing about that is too, like I had a runner that we were like working on it and she was prepping for a race and she was like, it's going to be really, really, it was, I think it was that July 4th one. It was gonna be really, really hot and the air quality was going to be bad. And I was like, okay, well then that should be part of your imagery. And she was like, well, why? I don't want to like put that negative, like bad air quality in my head. And I'm like, yeah, but that bad air quality is going to be there. So like, yeah, it's not the most helpful thing, like, but you can't control the weather. Like, it is going to be hot. Or like if you have quad pain or something, that should be part of your imagery because you're experiencing that and you're trying to mentally prepare for it. Kind of like going back to what I was talking about positive self-talk versus like helpful self-talk.
yeah.
Like it's not all you can't visualize like the happiest thing because that's not going to help you if that's not what you're experiencing.
I like that about your approach and what you said. Like, often people think, or some even talk about like all the positivity, but like sometimes things are hard and rough, and you kind of have to acknowledge those things and be able to move forward. But it's not often talked about. It's all like, or at least it's perceived. It could just be
Yes.
me, like, hey, the positive, the positive. But if I cramp on mile, which has happened to me, and I'm
Yeah.
not thinking about that, and then it happens, I'm caught off guard.
Right.
And it's just a reality. Like sometimes we got to deal with the reality. Uh, Last follow up on the same topic of imagery.
Mhm.
For someone that has a job and is working, family, kids, they can't do it like you said all the time. How often should they do this?
If you could do like either like sprinkle in like some short practices like once a day, like if you can give yourself 5 minutes, I think that's great. If you can only do like one day a week and maybe dedicate like 5 to 10, I think nothing is better or something is better than nothing. So like if you have kids, like maybe when your kids are at school, you're like, okay, this is my like mental skills hour I'm giving myself on Wednesdays. I'm going to go through my self talk and I'm going to go through my imagery. Great. Like, obviously the more professional, like higher level, I would be like, well, we got to be doing this like daily. But like if you're running and you're at that like kind of pre-professional, like elite but not professional level, try to do it once a week and see how it goes. And then you might find also that like the more you do it, the more automatic it becomes. And you are like, oh, I can kind of do this while I'm like, I don't know, like doing something like a mindful, like I'm vacuuming. I'm going to also kind of try to like do some of my self
Yeah,
talk or my imagery or whatever. So hopefully it becomes a little bit more like automatic and it doesn't feel like it needs to be such like a process.
got it. Okay. You said vacuum, and I instantly thought of, wait, how can I do that? And then I went, I could just put the music in the head, like the pool or
Yeah.
whatever sound, like the
Yeah.
cheering.
Yeah.
So it can be done.
It can be
uh,
done. Yeah. Yeah.
the last one I have for you is like, what are some books, quotes, or lessons that's kind of shaped you as a sports psychologist?
Ooh. Yeah, I would definitely say Relentless and The Mindful Athlete are two like really good books that definitely like kind of changed um, like or like opened my eyes to the world of sports psychology. Also, if you haven't seen The Last Dance, which I feel like everyone has seen it, but if you have not seen it, definitely like watch it. It's just such a great documentary about resiliency and mental toughness and all of that. I feel like now I'm in a place where like I'm like as I've been working more with athletes and artists, I feel like I've been doing a lot of self-reflection from my own performance career as a dancer. And I think there are a lot of like lessons I've been telling myself about what self-talk I could have told myself, why I got so worked up over these like little things. I feel like a lot of my lessons so far have been reflective of like, man, I wish I had the like a sports psychologist or like this kind of training at my disposal when I was an athlete. So I'm like, if you have the means to work with a sports psychologist or a mental skills coach, do it if you're really serious about improving your craft, because it's that much more, it's going to like put you at next level. Another good documentary is the Simone Biles one on Netflix, because she's someone who dealt with kind of her own version of the yips. She in gymnastics it's called the twisties, and going into Tokyo she had a mishap on the vault and like spatially like didn't know where she was, and it was all mental.
Yeah.
And she talks about that in her documentary. And a lot of times when like kids don't know what sports psychology is, I'm like, do you know who Simone Biles is? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, she uses a sports psychologist because she dealt with this like mental setback and like, needed to figure out what was going on. So that's another really good one. And she's just like an amazing athlete and role model, that I like really, really liked that documentary.
What do you got going on next for you? I know you're working on a new, correct me if I'm wrong here, but a certification or
Yeah, yeah. So I'm currently pursuing my certified mental performance consultant certification, which is kind of like a top level certification through the Applied Association of Sports Psychology. That's been a huge chunk of what I've been doing. It's like a 400-hour process, and I'm over halfway through, which is really exciting. And I'm working with a mentor who's kind of like helping me with some of that stuff. But it's been really like great and rewarding. So I'm doing that. I'm working with a bunch of athletes and artists right now on their mental performance, and then doing some personal training still part-time. So kind of like a nice mix of like fitness and mental health, which has kind of always been my like I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like the two of them are so connected. And like for personal training people, I'm always like, if you feel better physically, you're probably going to be feeling better mentally. So they're so connected. But yeah, that's been the life right now in Chicago, and it's summer. So it's been, as we were talking kind of about the weather, it's like when you live in the Midwest, you live in Chicago, you're like, summer is just everything. So
Yeah.
getting to be with my friends and family out here and enjoying summertime in Chicago has been awesome.
Yeah. Chicago. We were talking earlier. I love Chicago. Eager to go back at some point, but Chicago's awesome. The food alone, I can't remember off the top of my head. But there's this diner slash breakfast place I went to. My girlfriend's
Little
family lives
goat.
out there.
Yeah.
I can't remember it, but it is some of the best pancakes I've ever had in my life, and I'm not a pancake person by any means.
Okay.
uh,
Chicago is not short of good restaurants, which is a blessing and a curse for athletes and training clients alike.
yeah, if you can get out to Chicago for those listening,
Yeah.
Maggie, if people want to reach you and work with you as a sports psychologist, I'm going to put this in the description, but where should they reach you at?
Yeah, they can find me either on my website. They can contact me directly through there. It goes straight to my email, but my website is mgoodmanperformance.com. And then my Instagram, I'm like pretty into it on social media. My Instagram is mag.goodman. And you'll find me. It says sports psychologist. And I like to share stuff that we talked about, stuff in fitness. And then just like, I'm all for sharing like cat photos in my day-to-day life. So yeah.
Awesome. That's a wrap, guys. This has been an amazing episode. Thank you, Maggie, for sharing and discussing and sharing some of the insights on sports psychology. I hope for those listening, you got some takeaways. Imagery, self-talk, awesome to hear. And it's going to be, I'm going to get a little overexcited here and say a banger, but
I can't wait. This was awesome. It was so great talking to you. I love talking about this stuff. This is like the bread and butter of what I do.
Yeah, same here. I love psychology, and if you're listening to this episode moved you, follow us on Instagram, The People Run Podcast, or check out the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave a review, comment, no pressure, but it helps. Thanks for tuning in. This has been The People Run Podcast. Again, thanks, Maggie. Until next time.